My name is Igor Kolman. I'm by education a political scientist, and what is usually referred to as career for me started in the NGO sector. I then went into media as a journalist, then I went into public relations, then I went into politics, and now I'm in the process of transferring into a large corporation. So as one of the student colleagues said to me yesterday, you're going deeper and deeper into darkness. And if that is the truth, then I'm going to end up in the academia. But I'm not there yet. One of the things that I've noticed very early on, I was one of those children that was always very interested in politics and the state and the role of government and the citizen and the relationships between government and citizens and institutions. And I was lucky to grow up in a new democracy. I was 10 years old when the Iron Curtain fell. So I was growing up in a state that was also growing up. It was a bit younger than me, but somehow we were growing up together. And one of the things that I noticed very early on as a problem was this huge gap between the citizen on the one hand and the political system on the other. There was this huge gap that was not filled. The NGO sector was very weak, underdeveloped, and things like pressure groups or lobby groups or interest groups were non-existent. And even the communication between the state and the organizations of the civil society was non-existent. The state, also underdeveloped, did not see the opportunity to use civil society and its organizations in ways that they can be used, especially in areas like education, health, social services, and different ways in which modern, smart states use. Use is an ugly term in this context. Cooperate with the civil society to perform better. This gap, in my opinion, and this presentation is inspired by Croatia, but I think that many of the things that I'm going to say here today are applicable to a lot of other countries, more or less. This gap has not been filled. And this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Just before I define exactly what I mean by hybrid forms of representation, I have chosen just several characteristics of NGOs on one hand and political parties on the other that I'm going to use in this presentation today to show some of the ideas that I have about this. NGOs are usually single or few issues oriented. They tend to have more of a black and white view of the world in terms of achieving the goals that they need to achieve, and this is something that cannot be otherwise, because they cannot compromise if they want to achieve what they want. Political parties, on the other hand, deal with a wide variety of issues, some more, some less, but in the nature of a political party is to have an answer to a wide variety of issues, many more than is expected from an organization of the civil society. They serve or think about or should think about the public interest. On the other hand, internally, they're more flexible. Because in an NGO, if we're an NGO that says we need to protect the Amazon, then none of the people within this organization cannot say, no, I'm against protecting the Amazon. I think that all the trees should be cut down and we should grow something else there. In a political party, you have more flexibility. Members and even leaders of political parties can have somewhat different views on key issues. And then, obviously, in politics, compromise is the way to go forward. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm leaving that to some other discussion, but the fact is that compromise is the way you go forward. And now my definition. And like I said, I still think that in Croatia, but in many other countries and societies, this gap has not really been crossed. Or, which is even perhaps more dangerous, this gap is opening up again. My definition of hybrid forms of political representation that I'm using today for this presentation is individuals or organizations that enter the political arena claiming that they are not part of the existing political system. Syriza, Podemos, Donald Trump, most Živi Zid, those are coalition parties. I'm not going into their different characteristics for this short presentation. The characteristic that I chose is they all claim we are not part of the system, we are not part of the establishment. And that's a symbolically very important point, because it's a lie. It's a lie. The moment you run for office, you are a part of the political system. I think our colleague, Professor Gills, I don't know, it was discussed earlier on in one of the interventions. The moment you go into elections, you are part of the political system. You are not a part of the civil society anymore. And especially obvious that this is a lie is when these people come to power. Because then you see that not only are they a part of the establishment, they usually have all the faults and some new ones of the establishment that they claim to be fighting. Let me give you a short example from Croatia. We have a party now that is a junior partner in the ruling coalition. Their program is we are better than everyone else that has up to now been in politics in Croatia. The enemy are the classic, the traditional political parties. And they openly say, we are going to change them, we are going to influence other parties, we are going to demand that they change, that they be more democratic, that they do this and that. And then they say, in order to support the major partner in the coalition, we want this, and that law to be voted on in Parliament. But we are going to give our signatures only if these laws are voted very quickly, before everything is even set up. So, as all of you know, in Parliament it differs slightly, but not really. You need a certain procedure to get a law or proposal voted on. You need the debate in the committee, you need the opinion of the committee, you need the opinion of the government, you need different stages. And this party says, no, we're going to do all that in 2 days. We're going to break all the rules. The logic behind this is the following. We are better than others. We are less corrupt than others, or we are not corrupt, unlike the others. So it's okay for us to break even those few rules that those who we claim are corrupt and are worse than us have been obeying up till now. This is the problem with these hybrid forms of political representation. It doesn't matter if they're left or right or populist or ultra-conservative or single. It really doesn't matter. That's not the point. What they're always saying is it's the pure people on one side versus the corrupt elite on the other side, and there must be no compromise between the two. This is the basic message. This is Kasmada, but it doesn't matter. I mean, they all exclude, the question is only who. And I'm going to come back later to this. What they have in common is the derogation of the political. Directly, they always say politics is dirty, parties are dirty and corrupt. We are not politics. Indirectly, and this is much more dangerous than what they're directly saying about politics, indirectly, they usually operate with very vague, short, reduced messages and political ideas. And they always say issues are not important. They have one or two very vaguely put issues. Usually something like, the benefit of the people, the welfare of the people, something like that. And the real issues are not important. Ideas are not important. Ideologies are not important. Debates are not important. Values are not important. Or they say all of these things We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with the issues later. We'll deal with the policy later. We'll deal with the ideals later. First, we need to fulfill this vague goal that they have as their primary goal, which is obviously never fulfilled. But even if it is, this is a huge damage that is being done. And in terms of social power, if you have politics that forgets about issues, values, ideologies, policies, then is this politics increasing social power, or is it actually decreasing in every way imaginable? Anti-institutions, anti-establishment, anti-state, anti-politics, reduced, oversimplified messages against certain social groups, and there's always a clear enemy. I'll come to the enemies later. That's a very interesting part of this issue. I use the term tabloid politics. And to illustrate this term, I've chosen the cover of the Sun magazine, which says Queen, I mean, you've all seen this, or most of you have seen this, Queen backs Brexit. It was a lie and really a dirty way of doing your job as a journalist on so many levels. Why I call this tabloid politics? There's two ways why this politics is tabloid-like. First, it is influenced by this sort of boulevard view of the world. And on the other hand, it has the same characteristics as tabloid media. The principle is that there are no principles. There's no responsibility, especially for the spoken word, especially for what is being said, or what is being written. Quite the opposite if you criticize them. If you criticize the tabloid media, the Sun, or any newspaper like that in your own country, or if you criticize the tabloid politics, their hound dogs will tear you apart. But they have no responsibility for what they're saying. And they will stop at nothing. Who is attracted by tabloid politics? Antonio Barroso, a political analyst from London, says the losers of globalization. White, poorly educated, afraid of the loss of national identity. In our part of the world, political scientists used to say the losers of transition. But we have to be very careful. This is oversimplifying it. It's not just the losers of globalization or the losers of transition. There is support for this kind of politics in all walks of life, in all social groups, in all groups of education. I think that our colleague Alberto Zucconi might shed a light on why and who is actually, and what sort of personalities are attracted to this sort of politics. It exceeds the time and scope of this presentation. But what I wanted to warn about is that we shouldn't just look at it single-dimensionally and think it's always the unsatisfied, the poor, the uneducated, the losers. There's more to it than that. There's simply more to it than that. Our colleague Barry Gills, he's not here with us, unfortunately, yesterday said that, in one of the interventions, said that history is not, I'm paraphrasing, that the things are not linear and the development of history is not linear, that we go in circles, and that's absolutely right. And all of this that I'm saying is not absolutely new, and this has happened before in the history of the world. But there's one new thing, there's a new tool, an extremely dangerous tool in my opinion, if used improperly. And those are modern communication tools. The internet, social media, Facebook, Twitter, have become breeding ground. A Spanish professor whose name currently escapes me said it's the petri dish for populist politics. Twitter politics, Facebook politics. They influence it two ways. First of all, it's so easy to disseminate any sort of idea at this point in time. Anyone can present anything to huge amounts of people very quickly, very cheaply. But there's also another influence that, in my opinion, is more dangerous. The content is being adjusted to the, to the 150 signs. Messages are short, full of emotion, with lack of rationality, with lack of analysis. Just what, exactly what's popular online. And so the whole of politics becomes, a tweet of some extreme person who manages to find support in the the losers of the globalization, the losers of the transition, but also the others that I mentioned that are here as well. The enemy. Now, the enemy is a very interesting part of this. The first group, very clear, and it's always we always usually talk about it: immigrants, foreigners, minorities. All of these political subjects have, in one way or another, a problem with immigrants, foreigners, minorities of this kind or that kind. I'm not going to go into that because a lot has been said about that, and that's quite clear. What I think is more interesting is the system as a whole as an enemy. When I was, let me give you an example. When I was a member of parliament, there was increasing pressure, and not only in Croatia. My colleagues from Sweden told me that, and my colleagues from Germany, and wherever I talked to parliamentarians. It was the question, it was not the question, oh, you're not doing your job well, or you're lazy, or what's usually being said about politicians. It was more and more the question of why we need a parliament. And then, do we need a parliament? And then the answer, no. We don't need a parliament. We don't need debate. Debate is something futile, something that's not needed. A democracy without a continuous, never-ending, constructive debate is not a democracy. The elites. Of course, the political elites. I'm not going to go into that. But the academia is under attack. Education, knowledge. You have people saying, why don't they do something useful? Why are these students protesting? Give them a shovel and let them dig canals for 12 hours and then they won't be protesting. Things like that. Things like teachers have it easy. They have 2 months off every year. That's not a real job. Culture. In Croatia, culture was one of the main battlefields in the last year, political and social. Why do we need culture? Why are we going to pay? That's just amusement for the rich. We don't need theater. We don't need, whatever, museums. And then we're in a closed circle. Because what happens is that those in a society who have the capacity to give answers to real issues are under most attack. There's one more enemy. And I have it on the next slide, and that's the one that worries me the most, maybe. It's women. It's women. Women are again, the only majority in the world that is actually a minority still. Again, under attack. It goes from the brutal misogyny of Donald Trump to the debates of the again born ultra-conservatives in Eastern Europe about abortion. For instance, that's just 2 examples. We are discussing abortion again. In Poland, in Croatia, in different countries across the continent. And I'm not going to go into the discussion on abortion. But if we are discussing abortion, then we are not discussing the real issues. Then women are on the front line of defending something basic that we all thought was out of the question. But they are not debating why they are still not paid the same amount of money for the same job as men. They're not discussing why is it still, although in Croatia, for instance, the higher the level of education, the bigger the prevalence of women you have. But still, in top and middle managerial positions, in economy, in politics, in the state, they're all men, dominated by men. But no, we're not discussing these issues. We are discussing the question. Oh. Because the hybrid forms are taking us back. The problem with these hybrid forms of politics is that they're taking us back one way or another. Why? I have no pretensions of giving anything close to a complete answer. I'll just try to give some ideas for the debate later. Even the educated are not educated for civic virtue. Liberal democracies have forgotten that people need to understand the importance of such a system and all it brings. We have this huge machine with hundreds of buttons in different colors that need to be pushed. And sometimes we are asked to push them in elections and things like that, referendums. But there's no instructions of use. We have no idea how this machine is operated, actually, and what each of those buttons actually does. And of course, a normal human reaction for at least a part of us is that we are going to smash those buttons or that machine in frustration, in anger, because we're not able to use it. To use Almond and Verba's categories of political culture, what we have right now, in my opinion, developing is a participant culture with parochial levels of knowledge, understanding, and even interest. I'm going to use the word hybrid again. We have a parochial participant culture, a contradiction. But I'm telling you that we have, because people have knowledge, understanding, and interest often on the level of parochial culture, but they participate through tools like social media, through referendum, over-stressing direct democracy, and this is extremely dangerous. Especially the interest part. You have a lot of people who say, I'm not interested in politics. I'm not interested in the state. I'm not interested in the public good. But still, I take part, I protest, I write, I join these strange movements. Why? Nobody knows. The fact of the matter is that institutions and systems that surround us are extremely complex. Politics is getting out of hand. European Union, Russia, United States, terrorism, world order. It's terrible. Things like transatlantic trade and investment partnership. We know nothing about that still. And yet it's being debated for years now. People are afraid of things like that. It's understandable. Economy, global economy, huge companies, who can understand that? And knowledge. Knowledge is a problem as well. The amount of knowledge that is available to us, to our generation, is frustrating, because our ability to grasp is it's so small. I mean, you can, whatever effort you make, you can know only so little compared to the whole scope of knowledge available. And then with the fast changes, maybe in what you know now, in 3 years is obsolete. In many professions, in many walks of life. So people think they're powerless against this huge system that is overpowering. It's like an animal. We're cornered by a huge animal. And our normal reaction, at least for some of us, is defense, aggression. And then there's one more thing that I like to stress. We have become a throwaway society. But this is not only applicable to our fridges and our TVs. We have now gotten used to this. Whenever there is a small glitch, we are used to throwing out the whole machine. We don't fix things anymore. We just, you know, if there's a problem with our democratic system, a part of us says, let's throw it out. We want something else. And like Mr. Todd said yesterday, we are now in a period of multi-level crisis and problem. And this throwaway approach to democracy, to state, is just deepening the problem that we're facing. Loss of trust between people. I don't know if this is applicable to the whole world, but in my opinion, in the Western world, people interact less. I'm not talking about quantity. I'm talking about quality of our interactions. Let me give you an example. Facebook birthday congratulations. Before Facebook, you would say happy birthday to 10 people a year or 20 people a year, your family and your closest friends. Now, Facebook tells you every day this, and that person have their birthday. Wish them, some of those people you don't know who they are. So in terms of quantity, we maybe are interacting more. But in terms of quality, we are diluting quality. People do not take part in the public anymore. We have a sort of a breakup of civil society. I always thought that, do we? It's my feeling that more and more people are joining others in groups, not to achieve a common goal, but as Leonard Cohen would say, to be alone together, to fence off from others instead of achieving some goals together. I remember two quotes that one of my professors at university always used to tell me. There's nothing more practical than a good theory. This is especially applicable to the World Academy and all of you in the academia. And another quote was, political problems should be solved politically. There are no easy fixes, no short-term solutions. What we need, in my opinion, is debureaucratization and repolitization. Example, European Union. The problem of European Union is not too much politics, it's not enough politics. It's all bureaucracy. But there are no ideas, no ideals, no leaders anymore. Repolitization. Example, when I was younger in Croatia, the dream was always, we want a state where taxes and GDP are the main thing that politicians debate. Let me tell you, that's the worst nightmare. I want a state where politicians still debate what sort of system are we going to have to ensure people their dignity, their freedom, their rights. What's the role of the state? What's the role of the church? Those debates have vanished. Even if we talk about taxes, I want to know why the conservatives are saying these are the taxes that we want, and the liberals are saying those are the taxes we want. And regrouping of political parties. I have worked with, for, against, inside, outside of political parties for all of my adult life. And let me tell you, they are in a terrible crisis. I mean, Donald Trump is the candidate of the Republican Party of the United States of America. There's nothing more to be said about the need to regroup political parties. And civic education. Civic education, this is where all of you, and I hope one day me as well, together with you, we come in. We need to give the people the instructions for use for the democratic state. Thank you so much.